Hello. Today we are talking about ratios, and we're kind of going into a new unit about ratios and rates and unit rates. But today we're just focusing on what a ratio is. And you might have heard the word ratio before. But what a ratio is it's a way to compare two quantities or two amounts. Two quantities, and quantity just means amounts. So two quantities. So you're basically just comparing two amounts. You've got some number of something and another number of something else, and you're just comparing them. And how we write that is called a ratio. There's a few different ways to write a ratio. I'll use the example right now just of the ratio 2 to 3. Ratios are read like I just said it, which is 2 to 3. So 2 to 3, that's one way to write a ratio. Now there's a couple other ways to write a ratio. Another way is to, instead of using this word 2, you can use what's called a colon, which looks like this. And you read it the same way, 2 to 3. The other way to write a ratio is as a fraction. And that's probably going to be our most helpful way to write ratios. But we're going to use all three of these throughout our lesson today. So the other way is 2 to 3. Now, in previous lessons, before we started talking about ratios, we would have read this as 2/3 or 2 divided by 3. When we are talking about ratios, you are going to read this as 2 to 3, just like that, okay? All of these are read the same way, okay? And all of these mean the same thing. All of these three ways are the exact same ratio. They're just written in different ways. So we're going to look at some examples of comparing two quantities and how we could write ratios from that. All right. So a lot of times ratios come in the form of comparing items. So this problem says there are there are 3 red shirts, 3 red, I'm just summarizing the information, 3 red shirts and 7 yellow shirts. 3 red and 7 yellow shirts. What is the ratio of red shirts to yellow shirts? So we are going to write a ratio, and notice how they are asking red shirts first and yellow shirts second. So in our ratio, we have to write the number of red before the number of yellow. So the first way we could do that is 3 red, because remember it's 3 red, so red shirts, there's 3 of them, to 7 yellow. So that's one way to write this ratio. We could also use the colon. We could do 3 to 7. And remember, the last way is to write it as a fraction. 3 to 7. Now, notice how, since the red shirts came first when they told us to write the ratio, they said write the ratio of red to yellow. They did not say yellow to red. They said red to yellow. So we have to start with the number of red for our ratio. Okay, the number of red shirts is 3. So 3 comes first in each of these. And 7 is the second number because they asked for it as the second item. So it's 3 to 7, 3 to 7, 3 to 7. In each of those cases, we wrote the ratio with the number of red shirts first because that is the number that the problem asked for to come first. All right. This one you're going to think about on your own a little bit. So maybe even pause the video. I'm going to read it. Maybe pause the video after I read it to you. there are 3 math teachers and 2 ELA teachers. What is the ratio of math teachers, notice that math came first, to ELA teachers? In your ratio, you are going to have to put the number of math first and then the number of ELA second. So maybe pause the video and write what you think that this ratio would be. It doesn't matter which of the 3 ways you write it, or you can write it in all 3 ways. Okay, so if you took a minute to write this ratio, notice that it says 3 math teachers and 2 ELA teachers. What is the ratio of math to ELA? So we have to put math as the first number. So how many math teachers were there? 3. How many ELA teachers were there? 2. What is the ratio of math teachers to ELA teachers? 3 to 2. And again, we can also write this as 3 colon 2. Or we can write it as a fraction, 3 over 2, which is also read 3 to 2. Notice how in all of these, since they asked for math teachers first, the number of math teachers was 3. So 3 has to be the first number in each of these ratios. If they had asked for ELA teachers first, 2 would be the first number in each of these ratios. Okay. Sometimes it's nice to use something that has like pictures instead of words. So this says, what is the ratio of moons to pentagons? So a moon is this shape. This is going to look like a banana, but oh well, you guys can deal with it. That's the moon, and the pentagons are this. Okay, that's the pentagons. So what is the ratio of moons to pentagons? So how many moons are there? Take a second and count how many moons there are. All right, so how many moons are there? Let's see. There are, I'm going to draw my little picture. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 moons. So there's 13 moons. Now count how many pentagons there are. Count how many pentagons there are. I'm going to double count the moons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay. Now count the pentagons. Count the pentagons. How many pentagons? How many pentagons? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 pentagons. Okay. Now it is asking for the ratio of moons to pentagons. So the number of moons is 13. It says moons first. So in our ratio, we have to put moons first. So ratio of moons to pentagons, 13 to 5. How else can you write this? There's 2 other ways we can write these ratios. Be thinking right now, how else can you write these ratios based on what we saw before? We can also write it 13 to 5 with a colon. Still read it as 13 to 5 though. And then the last way is as a fraction, 13 to 5. But since it's a ratio, we still write it, or we still read it as 13 to 5. So each of these are the same ratio, and each of these tell us the ratio of moons to pentagons is 13 to 5. All right, next up. What is the ratio of moons to triangles? Moons to triangles. So start counting. How many moons are there? That one really looks like a banana. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 5 moons. Now count how many triangles. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's also 5 triangles. So it says moons to triangles. So it says moons. So we're putting the number of moons first. 5 to 5. How else can we write it? Be thinking what the other 2 ways are. How about 5 to 5? And the last one is 5 to 5 as a fraction. Okay, there's 5 moons, 5 triangles, so the ratio is 5 to 5. Now, here's something really interesting. When we have a ratio where there's the same amount of both of the items or both of the quantities, so this is 5 to 5, that is the same thing as 1 to 1. And you might hear this sometimes. A 1-to-1 ratio is when you have, for every one of one thing, you have one of another. It's perfectly matched. There's the exact same amount. Okay, so that is actually the same thing as 1-to-1, 1-to-1, and 1-to-1. All of those are the same thing. And the reason is because for every moon, there's a triangle. For every moon, there's a triangle to match it. So this guy could go to that guy and this one. So for every moon, there is one, for every one moon, there's one triangle also. So that's kind of 1-to-1 because there's the same amount. They could be paired off perfectly. Okay. The last type of problem changes the wording a little bit, but we're still going to use what we know about ratios, what we've already learned about ratios, to write the ratio for this type of problem that's just a little bit slightly different. Okay, so there are 5 cars for every 3 trucks in a parking lot. So imagine this like the Walmart parking lot. For every 5 cars, there's 3 trucks. Okay, every time you count 5 cars, there's 3 trucks. What is the ratio of trucks to the total number of vehicles in the parking lot? So this kind of switches it up a little bit. So there's 5 cars, 3 trucks. I'm highlighting the important information. Now, what the ratio is asking for is not cars to trucks, not trucks to cars. It is asking for the number of trucks to the total number of vehicles in that parking lot. Okay, so we know that the trucks is 3. But the other number has to be the total of cars and trucks, because it says, what is the ratio of trucks to the total number? So we have to figure out the total. Total means add. So altogether, there's 5 cars and 3 trucks. So together, how many vehicles are there in that? So 5 cars, 3 trucks. So 5, 6, 7, 8. So the total for our ratio is 8. So the ratio of trucks to total is 3 to 8, because for every 3 trucks, there are 8 total vehicles. Okay, and the other ways that we can write this are 3 to 8 and 3 to 8. Okay, so just be careful. Make sure you're putting your ratios in the order that it is asking for. Okay, if it's saying cars to trucks, put the number of cars first. If it's saying trucks to total, put the number of trucks first and then make sure you're using the total. Okay, so you just have to be making sure that you're paying attention to what it's asking for. And you don't really have to do much calculating. You mostly just have to look at what the numbers are for each thing or each item or each category and decide which comes first in the ratio. Okay? All right. Good job and good luck.